Projections, folks. Today we're going to be talking about 5 must-have players and 5 potential busts based on Razzball's projections. And we got the man behind the curtain joining the show today. Before we do, we want to make sure you follow us across the board at Razzball Fantasy on YouTube, IG, and TikTok. We got daily content dropping on all those mediums. And next week, we have must-have quarterbacks, wide receiver episodes, and tight ends dropping all week long. But also make sure, of course, you go to razzball.com. Not only can you find all these great projections over on razzball.com, but you can find all the great articles from all our great writers, not only for football, we have baseball, hockey, and basketball as well. So make sure you go to razzball.com to get all the things you need to win your fantasy league. Let's start the show. All right, folks, bringing the man from behind the curtain, the Razzball projections expert, Rudy Gamble. You can find him at Rudy Gamble on Twitter. What's going on, Rudy?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you like making me think I've got curtains. I'm like just like an underground bunker.
No,
That's how we do things. You know, I've never flown on the same flight as Gray.
Okay.
Because you just.
No, I was going to say, I always thought of you like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. You're pulling all these levers. You got all these projections. And then, look, you're just a regular guy just like the rest of us. And I love it. Man, I'm just excited to have this show today. I really am, man.
I'm seeing a bunch of Giant jerseys back there. I've got, I am from New Jersey. I am a Giant fan. The only pro team I actually care about anymore. So I don't really care. Although, I mean, you can only care so much these days.
Like, honestly, it's Daniel Jones. Really, I'm hoping Brian Daboll can turn him around. But yeah, man, I'm from originally New Jersey too, so that's awesome. But at the same time, I don't know, man. He doesn't look too sharp in the preseason. What's your thoughts on Daniel Jones before we get started?
No, I mean, like the expectations are just so low. So it's but I mean, he did show something his first year. He's had such a mess. I think he's like above like Darnold, like in terms of like, I don't think he's hopeless. But yeah, there's very few examples, I guess, that that you could point to, like Tannehill.
Yeah, right.
I mean, he's got athleticism. So I mean, you're starting with athleticism, arm, and a brain. Maybe just, so very, very cautious optimistic. It'd be a lot more helpful if they had healthy wide receivers.
Absolutely. All right, this is not a Giants podcast. Before we get off the rails, let's talk a little bit about today why we're actually here. It is to talk through the Razzball projections for 2022. We have pulled out some of the main players that are either must-have and or bust based on your projections versus Razzball ADP. However, before we even get started talking about the players, we do want to do a quick overview. Just kind of give us your elevator. We just got on the first floor of the elevator. We're going up to floor 5. Give me your elevator pitch on what the deal is with your projections.
Yeah, I mean, I try to go into the projections as bias-free as possible. So it's kind of the way I approach each season. Kind of come in fresh, and see it as, for me, football projections are all about you're starting at the team level. That's helping drive things like how much they pass, how much they rush. Vegas win totals give us an idea of what the spreads will be for future games. I'm plotting out the whole season. And it all comes down to, once you figure out how many receptions, it all comes down to target share or how many passes. It comes down to target share distribution, rush share distribution, and then within there, you'll get in things like how you're going to divvy up the TDs. You're starting with last year, typically, but you could incorporate. Yeah, there's not much you're getting past that, but you're basically starting with both. I think you're trying to figure out the snaps, and you start with snaps. You adjust targets, you adjust rushes, you fit to the team. And then you look at it and you iterate a ton of times. There's a bunch of things where like what the precedent has been for a guy totally fits. There's other guys I'm going to adjust up and down based on maybe he was injured, maybe there's a role change, maybe, anything has happened. But see it as like for a case maybe like San Francisco, where you're like, wow, the two wide receivers and the tight end, get targeted a lot. And let's just imagine if that happened, you've got too many targets. It'll just all mash it down in the projections. If you want to if you want to take, any team's quarterbacks throws, match it to the targets, it's going to match. And then it's just and that's helping me set a baseline, and then just constantly going through and looking for little anomalies, anything that that doesn't look quite right, listening to everything going on during camp, just trying to read tea leaves, not taking anything overly serious, but it's that middle ground of saying, like, there are real signals coming out. Never be too stubborn in your position on things. And then you kind of see where the rankings go. And yeah, there's times where you're like, I'll probably dig in more on players where I feel uncomfortable because I rank them too high or low. And at some point, either they get adjusted down. That's the value of QA, or I feel stronger in my position because I've dug in on those. I mean, I'm not going to spend a ton of time digging in whether I think Allen, it should be Allen Mahomes or Mahomes Allen. Those. I'm like, those look fine. It's the digging in on like Trey Lance you're doing a lot of, and thinking through things like that. So it's an iterative process. It starts like right after the draft and kind of goes pretty much through the end of the season, with obviously it being a much more week-to-week focus once the season starts. But yeah, so it's been I think, get a little better at it every year.
That's good. That's good.
Unlike everything,
2022 is going to be the best year. 2022 will be your best year.
No, 2020. Yeah, I finished like 14th on the Fantasy Pros thing, which was a mild surprise for me last year on the preseason stuff, because in-season stuff went a little sideways for me at one point. So I mean, but it was like great on quarterbacks and wide receivers, bad on running backs. So like there's where it sometimes seems on Twitter, there's always something for people to brag about and feel good, like that one take they got right. That's, for me, it's like the opposite on things. It's always like, what's something that's going to keep me grounded or humble or motivated? I need like a fire, and it's not it's not from being right. It's from not being wrong. And if I ever get everything right, then I'll just pack it up.
All right. Well, let's get into today. So people who are watching the show and understand what we're doing today is we're comparing Rudy's projections and where he has players and positional rank versus the ADP over on Razzball. The first combination today is Kareem Hunt versus Elijah Mitchell. Why we have these two paired is because Rudy essentially has these guys inverted versus ADP. So, for example, current ADP for Elijah Mitchell is RB23. And for Kareem Hunt, it's RB31. In Rudy's projections, he actually has Kareem Hunt up at 18 and Elijah Mitchell all the way at RB33. So, Rudy, give the people why that is. What makes Hunt the better value and better pick in 2022?
Yeah, and we're talking like half PPR, right? Or even maybe half or full PPR.
Yeah, correct.
When Hunt has played the last 3 years, and all three of them are with Chubb, on a per game basis, he's like an RB20, and that's sharing with Chubb the whole time. So to me, with Chubb, you've got the floor of when he's healthy. He has played, I think last year he missed some time, and 2019, I believe he missed some time. When he plays, he's a top 20 guy. I have no reason to think he's not hurt coming into camp. His feelings might be hurt because, I don't know, he wants to be traded or something like that. I don't put much stock in it, because running backs, no one cares what their feelings are. You're not gonna freeze a running back out. You do that to wide receivers. You never do that to a running back. So he comes in, he's I have him at like 160 carries, like 10 a game. That's generally what he does. I think if anything, Cleveland might run more this year with Brissett, and then a quarterback who's going to be quite rusty. So you got 10 carries a game. He's very effective there. He gets some red zone touches. It's not a case where Chubb only gets those. And then he's the third down back too. So you're getting, the third, and Chubb is clearly not, and is not, even when Hunt's out, he doesn't get that role. So you got Hunt with a very defined role that gets him a floor of 20. And you're getting the upside if Chubb's ever out. If, if Chubb's out, Hunt is a first round pick right now. And if Hunt gets traded in concept, his value probably only goes up. So the projection is just like him. Like I said, 160 rushes, 57 receptions. If you look at his past years, that's not that far off. That's pretty much his baseline. His baseline's got a nice value. For Mitchell, I mean, the obvious is that, there's so much competition. Kyle's fickle. I can't project him I have him projected just short of 200 rushes. He's a very good runner. He's not shown anything in the receiving game. So you're giving up there. I'm looking at that. I would take Mitchell if you were just talking rushing, and fairly even, probably even on rushing touchdowns. But I'd give you a little bit on Mitchell. Hunt's giving you a better pass game, and I don't see any more risk with Hunt because with Mitchell, I'm worried about all the other running backs and the fact that Lance is going to gobble up some red zone touchdowns and, potentially some other carries.
So, for my opinion on Kareem Hunt is did my rankings in PPR. So when I'm looking at PPR focused, in 2021 he was the RB23 on a per game basis. So he's like a low end RB2, like you kind of just pointed out. Jacoby Brissett necessarily isn't a heavy targeted guy for running backs. Last year, the Dolphins running backs in the games he started and finished at an 18% target share. In 2019, the Colts were 25th in RB targets. But the thing was, Baker didn't target his running backs that much. I mean, Kareem Hunt had, a nice 55 targets or so 2 years ago. So I'm not overly concerned about the Brissett factor necessarily. On Elijah Mitchell, I think the biggest concern for me is that he missed 5 games, but from 3 different injuries. So he got a concussion, then he got a finger injury. And it just seems like these backs can't stay healthy because Shanahan likes these small speed backs and they ended up getting banged up and they're done. So I understand the hesitation on Mitchell as well. Let's jump down to our next group. It's Leonard Fournette and Derrick Henry. Now, Derrick Henry, I think at this point, coming off the foot injury, we know the injuries with the offensive line, but still, ADP has him at RB4. Leonard Fournette right now at ADP is RB14 over on Razzball.com. In your projections, you actually have Fournette at 8, and you have Derrick Henry down at 11. So talk to us a little bit why those two guys are flipped in your projections.
Yeah, the key for me with Fournette is that it's hard not when you think Fournette, and him coming in at 240 didn't help things. But you think of this plotter who's just a great runner out of LSU. He had a ton of targets last year. It's a very perception driven because Joe Mixon, who did come out of college as seemingly a very good receiving threat, Fournette gets targets better than Mixon. I feel like the perception is just screwed up. I think it was the same with Miles Sanders for a couple years until finally people are like, Miles Sanders is not going to get any receptions. He's not a dual threat guy. Fournette is. The guy who could take the receptions, Bernard, I think, is on last legs. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets cut. Keyshawn Vaughn never became a thing. Ronald Jones is gone, which, didn't, at least cut in maybe onto red zone. And I do not think, I think Rachaad White might be okay, but I don't think Tom Brady has patience for rookie running backs in the pass protection game. So I think Fournette has a really good touch floor. I mean, I got him at 225 carries and 60 receptions. The team's going to score a lot. They've leaned a little bit on the pass. They've thrown a disproportionate amount of pass versus rush touchdowns. Not super surprising with the changes there with no Gronk. There's probably upside there. Fournette could have 15 touchdowns, but I have him at 8, a decent number. I have Henry at 9, or a little over 9. So I see Fournette as a great buy. Henry, on the other hand, he's amazing. He's been amazing. And so I don't really want to disparage. I think the challenge is part of what's made him amazing is him having superhuman carries, like 350 carries, and then great efficiency with them. And that's where, I've got him at 200, not like about 300 carries this year, which is not, I think, fair. It's hard to go, but like maybe Thomas. I still might have Derrick Henry as the most carries. So I have 75 more carries than Fournette. It's just he's not going to get involved in the pass game anymore. A little worried because they really don't have any great. They don't have a WR1 on that team. So I could see that whole team just having some challenges. I think at this point, I think you can't. At best, Henry's going to be like a very good running back. And half PPR, I don't see him paying off up there. So I'm shocked his ADP hasn't fallen. I think the sharper drafts, the high stakes, I wouldn't be surprised if those that I'd be shocked to see him go in the first round in those type of leagues.
Best
And
ball
Fournette's
and
I'd say Fournette's creeping up. So I think I got Fournette in the Razzball at like the end of the second round, and I feel like Fournette, he's not at the turn yet, but he's like starting to be early second. Is where early to mid second is what I would think with him. There's a lot of good backs, so it's hard to like kind of pinpoint. One with him is that I think he's the one back. I don't think he's sharing. So to me, Henry is, but like there's a few other guys like an Aaron Jones. I'm like, I don't give me Fournette over that, or just take a wide receiver. Don't. No need to rush for like a guy who's the one with a 1A.
So just to bring up your point, NFC ADP has him at 8.7 and 10.8, and then Best Ball 10s have it 8.7. So, and then you start getting to ESPN Sleeper. That's where you start seeing the top five.
Yeah.
So, the one thing I'll say about Fournette is that if you look at it's a Tom Brady-led offense, number one. And Tom Brady's going to utilize his running backs. There's also a lot of correlation between tight end targets and running back targets. It's a lot more correlation than wide receiver to running back. So losing a guy like Gronk could only help Fournette in the passing game get more targets. The other aspect of this, too, as you just brought up, was your weight. I actually looked at weighted opportunity. Last year, if you looked at just his touches and you just compared every running back scored the same amount of points on a carry inside the 5, a red zone carry, I did it all, he would have finished as RB5 because he got such valuable touches and he got so many receptions and goal line work that he's a top 5 back. And that's, I think the only thing I would hesitate on is the offensive line issues are starting to compound a little bit. They are losing a couple guys.
Bring that up.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think that could help on the receiving side. They might get some more targets there, but that's one where it's like, rushing efficiency is really tough to gauge. It is going to be a bit more challenging, but it would be another reason why it's hard to see White getting a lot of playing time. Eating it to be like a full share. I could see his role being more like Ronald Jones. Maybe he gets every like 4th series kind of thing or something like that.
A breather back, basically. Listen, I think the other thing, too, is just look historically at the rookie running backs that has succeeded with Tom Brady. They're 2 down guys. It was like Sony Michel and like Lawrence Maroney way back in the day. They're not passing down backs. He's going to be in there on 3rd down. I think they brought in Gio because if Leonard Fournette goes down, Gio will be the 3rd down back, and they'll bring in a 2 down guy to help out as well. All right, let's jump down to the next group of guys. It's actually, you like Michael Pittman so much, you want to throw 2 guys under the bus for this segment, Mike Evans and A.J. Brown. So let's break this down. First off, Michael Pittman's going wide receiver 13 at ADP. Evans and A.J. Brown are going 9th and 11th, respectively. Of course, because of the theme of the show, you have it flipped. Right now, you have Michael Pittman at wide receiver 6. Talk about aggressive. I love it. Mike Evans all the way down at 15 and A.J. Brown at 17. So talk to us. Why do you have Pittman in your top 10 and the other guys outside your top 10?
So Pittman's a guy that it was, I didn't see it coming out of college per se. He had a decent rookie year, but nothing great. What impressed me last year is that with a junky quarterback, or let's just say, Wentz is bottom half at least. He got a lot of targets last year. Now you're bringing in a better quarterback, I think, in Matt Ryan, and there's not a lot of target options there. You look at, you got a rookie Pierce, you got Paris Campbell, who I like, but has trouble staying healthy. You look at it, you're almost like, is he fighting against Hines? Is he fighting? I mean, the tight ends don't look like a threat. So I have him as like an extremely high target floor guy. I'm projecting him at like 100 receptions. And with Ryan, yeah, I think the efficiency numbers go up. I just have him as like just a really strong play. And every other thing I've seen on him is that he gets separation. He wins on every type of route. All the preseason stuff with him and Ryan has been great. So I think he's just being a little underrated there. Every receiver in the top 15 is very, very good to great. But I just like, from a position side, I really like where he's at. Brown and Evans are kind of two different issues. With AJ Brown, I mean, the guy's a great. He's done incredibly well efficiency wise. It sounds like he's a little more dependent on big plays, and like the Philly volume might be a little better, but he's got Devonta Smith, he's got Dallas Goedert there. I just don't see it. I mean, like I have him as like top 20 wide receiver, but I don't see with that. I think Indy probably passes maybe a little bit more, about the same. I don't see how AJ Brown's getting more catches than Pittman. I don't see how he's getting more targets. And because of that, I don't see why he's going to get disproportionate amount of TDs when he's got a great tight end there. And you've got Hunt or Hurts looking for every opportunity to maybe run one in. So I don't understand that flip. I think that's overrating AJ Brown's killer efficiency that he did not show last year, by the way. If you look at his yearly yard per target, it goes down every year. It's hard to stay at the 10 plus yards per target. Oh, yeah. Now Mike Evans has a different case. So like Mike Evans, and people love, you've seen this, you might have heard the stat that he's had over 1,000 yards every year for 7 or 8 years. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's got a tremendous floor. He's had a very good career. I still like him this year. He's not a guy with the routes he's going to run and with Brady that's going to get the extreme targets. So think of like 125, which is like, I don't know, maybe like 8 a game. That's really good. To get to like 9 to 10 a game, where I think Pittman is, I don't see Evans getting there. Godwin is healthy, or Godwin's healthy. I see him ramping in, but you got a guy who's got like Russell Gage, who can get some targets. Brady's going to pass it around. He's not going to funnel it to Evans. The reason why Evans has been able to have his finishes have been strong the last 2 years under Brady. His touchdowns have been 10 plus. Which makes some sense because he's kind of tall, makes some sense because they have a really good offense. He's also been his efficiency there has been hard to keep up. He wasn't over targeted in the red zone. That's the tough thing to think about with him. He isn't, he got targeted less than Godwin. So to keep getting 10 plus touchdowns is hard to get. I still like him for touchdowns. The best of this group, but yeah, it's a lot to throw in there. But to me, yeah, Pittman is the only guy out of these three that'll end up in any of my teams.
Yeah, I think the thing with Pittman, too, is last year I think you have to take into the fact that the Colts only threw the ball 521 times in a 17-game season. Now, a lot of people might say they went to conservative because of JT. I think it was because of Wentz and his turnovers. I think Frank Wright dialed things back. The 3 previous seasons, the 17-game pace for the offense was 605. And just a year prior with Phillip Rivers, the 17-game pace was 586. You start stacking that volume onto his efficiency from last year, he starts getting into the top 10 easy. So I'm all in on Pittman this year. I agree with A.J. Brown. I just would push back slightly on Mike Evans just because you start seeing when Godwin and Gronk were out. So if I just looked at the games without Gronk, his points jumped to 17.9 PPR points per game. And then if you start looking at the games where he didn't have Gronk and or Godwin, it jumps to 19.1. I just don't think there was so much talent between AB, Gronk. And listen, I know this is an argument I made before on the show, but Gronk and AB were Tom Brady's guys. He brought them in. Mike Evans had to earn it. Now those guys are gone. I think Mike Evans is his guy, and I think that there's more upside for him because of that, especially if Godwin gets off to a slower start. All right, let's jump down to our last group here. It's Amon-Ra St. Brown versus Amari Cooper. And I think this one's interesting because, listen, right off the bat, you would think Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to be going ahead of Amari Cooper, which he is slightly in ADP. It's 26 versus 32 for Amari Cooper. The biggest surprise is that you actually have Amon-Ra St. Brown at wide receiver 21 and Amari Cooper nearly double. Actually, it is double at wide receiver 44. So ADP has these guys basically a coin flip for who to pick. You don't see it that way. So tell us why that is.
So, yeah, I think Amon-Ra St. Brown, especially with Jameson Williams missing time this year. So he's going to be out the first half. What he showed in the second half with his target rates were insane to end the year last year. And to me, it sets a really high floor. You got the consistency with the offense with Goff. So I just see him at not someone who's going to crush in like efficiency in terms of like yards per target, but a kind of a 90 reception, 1,000-yard guy. Let's say, to me, just it's a reason why he gets into the 21, I think, is, his target rate. And, his touchdowns will never be great. But a lot of it's like the team context. With Amari, that team is a mess. He's consistently missed time every year. And so I see him as a guy that's not going to be on the field as much as you'd want as in a starting wide receiver. And it just has gone down every year with him. I just see the floor as being one where he's playing 12 games. And just not being targeted enough by like Brissett. So maybe if you're starting the year with Watson, maybe things are different. Just looking last year, he played 14 games. He only had 786 yards. He had, his target rate what was his target rate? 16% for the year. I feel like we're seeing slippage there. I see it. I don't think going to Cleveland's never the answer for when things, I guess for Kareem Hunt, but Amari doesn't have a rap sheet. So, so that I just look at it like, I don't see the safety in Amari. I see it as the type that he's got like a name, he's got a brand. But that slippage from last year, which was maybe a little bit a whole Dallas thing, was poor. So to me, like, it's an easy one going with Amon-Ra St. Brown, a guy who I'm probably a type of guy I want to get at a certain point in the draft where Amari Cooper is totally off my board.
I want to start drafting Amon-Ra St. Brown like early round 5. I start seeing him there, and I'm like, this seems because you laid out some of the keys, but just to give it perspective, last year he wasn't a full-time player, but then they started letting him around week 12. He started getting almost 100% of snaps. He started getting in those games. He averaged 21.3 PPR points per game. Guess that's like Devontae Adams numbers. Like, that is insane. It's not just like casually, he was like a low-end wide receiver too. It's like, no, he was like a top 3 player in fantasy.
Right.
That's
right. I'm looking at it.
Here.
The last 6 games, he had 10, 11, or 12 targets a game.
Yeah, amazing.
And the low was 8 receptions. So it's not even like he was getting airmailed the ball. That is unique. There's a reason why even people are drafting Kadarius Toney with all the headaches are Kadarius Toney. Because he put up like 2 games like that. He put up like maybe 2. This is 6 straight games when, you're right. He wasn't getting, as much playing time in the beginning, or certainly wasn't getting the looks from Goff. So, it is. like to see the potential for a 160 target season. And I've got him projected 130. So 160 being like thinking like the 10 a game.
Yeah.
So yeah, like volume runs everything when especially you get half PPR, full PPR. So yeah, that if anything, you get out of this, I'll take volume over efficiency any day. Um, and yeah, in this case, St. Brown crushes Cooper, I think.
Well, the other thing I want to talk about too at St. Brown's, just about him as a player. Goff targets the slot more than any quarterback over the last decade. It's 75% of his attempts go to the middle of the field. It's an insane number. It's only two players that I've charted that actually done that. Two quarterbacks. That's it. Him and Jimmy G are the only two that have ever done that. The other thing is that his offensive play caller, Dan Campbell, comes from the New Orleans Saints. That team featured a slot guy in Michael Thomas. And also, if you want to go way back in the day to the Miami Dolphins, when Ben Johnson, who's the OC now, and Dan Campbell were on the team, they featured a guy named Jarvis Landry. So it's not unheard of that this offense features a slot guy, that Jared Goff, who featured Cooper Kupp, who, by the way, who had multiple top, 15, 20 seasons with Goff. So I'm just all in on St. Brown. The Amari Cooper, I will say this. If Deshaun Watson was starting week 1 and playing 17 games, this would be a completely
That's
different conversation.
totally.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's not happening, though, because he's probably not going to be available until Watson's not going to be there until game 12 because he's got the bye week for fantasy football purposes for us. But the other aspect of this, too, though, is like, listen, Brissett's going to be fine. And listen, T.Y. Hilton had, high-end wide receiver 3 numbers. Waddle in the games with Jacoby Brissett had high-end wide receiver 3 numbers, but you're basically drafting him at his current ADP, probably close to his ceiling with Jacoby Brissett. So that's not a guy we want to draft. So I understand completely. I agree with Amon-Ra St. Brown on this one 100%. You know what, Rudy? I said that was the last one. We're here. We might as well just do it. We got one more, folks. We want it. At this point, we're already in the zone. We have Chris Olave versus Drake London. Now, Chris Olave is currently ADP wide receiver 44. That's 4 spots lower than Drake London. In your projections, you have them flipped. You actually have Olave at 37, projection for Drake London 45. Now, it's surprising, of course, because London doesn't have the competition for targets, but talk to us why you have Olave higher.
Yeah, so this is one. I mean, now I thought there was an interesting way to close because you got the 2 rookies. You don't have any kind of precedence to go on. For me, I look at the London situation. You say, well, there's no competition. He does. He has Kyle Pitts. You've also got a quarterback situation that's pretty bad, a team situation that's just bad. And I just don't know with the Mariota London connection. I'm not overly convinced. That was a team that didn't support. I mean, I guess you had Russell Gage was the wide receiver that of note last year. I just think it could be bad. I think you could be looking at a situation where, I have London in a decent year, 65 receptions, 837 yards. It's fine. I don't see him getting a ton of touchdowns on that team. When I look at Olave, I look at a team where, we've got Winston there. And what I like about Winston is he'll throw downfield. Obviously, Olave is not going to get dinged if he throws an interception. The competition for him is just there's 2 guys. One is Kamara. One is Michael Thomas. I've got Olave ahead of Michael Thomas now because the injuries with Michael Thomas are high, but also Michael Thomas's route tree, or not just think A-dot. I'll get it simpler because I'm not going to pretend to know which routes he was running. His A-dot is a small, short, low A-dot guy. Breeze like that. Peyton like that to an extent, or at least in later day Breeze. We don't have that anymore. They're both gone. Winston doesn't want to throw a 10-yard pass. He wants to throw it 20 yards. I don't see a reason why Michael Thomas needs to be overly funneled to. And then you add his fragility to it. And then the reality was Kamara, the 100-target Kamara that we know is gone because Winston's not throwing it 100 targets to Kamara. So I look at him like, I think Olave ends up leading the team in targets, and he's the number 1 guy. He's the only guy that's going to get the downfield targets. So I liked him coming out of college. I see him as a guy that's going to, has potential to go Jefferson on the season, on the league. But for projection sides, have him at like 73 receptions, 932 yards. But to me, the upside's much that he's like pretty much the number one pick for me. If he's around in like the 8th or 9th round, I want Olave. I think it's a good situation. Yeah, I'm really psyched at him in a way that I don't know how you could get psyched about London and Atlanta. Mariota, and then
yeah. I think, well, this is the first thing when it comes down to it. Chris Olave, I think Jarvis Landry, you have to talk about him. The guy has 5 seasons of 130 targets, and he's going to demand looks. It's just, this is an offense last year, by the way, who was bottom 3 in the NFL in pass attempts, on top of the fact that they had no receiver. I know they didn't have good receivers, but they had no receiver that had over 700 receiving yards. The problem for me is I don't care. As much as I want to believe in the talent of Chris Olave, the problem is Jameis Winston, I think, you could make the same argument made about Carson Wentz. They dialed back the passing volume because they don't want him turning the ball over. I mean, he did have some big games last year, but if you look at his stat lines, he had like a game of 250 yards, 4 touchdowns, and then he had 175 and 1. And that's like this up and down fragility. And I think Kamara is going to still get his looks. But those 3 receivers worries me a lot especially because if you start factoring in that no one got 700 yards last year, and then you got 3 guys who demand targets who definitely should be over 700, it's hard to get up that high. For Drake London, and listen, I'm not really drafting a lot of Drake London either, but I will say that the top 10 pedigree does help him long-term. Top 10 picks typically have a better hit rate. The other thing is Rashad Matthews, as the number 1 for 2 seasons with Mariota, had a top 20 finish, and he was top 40 in points per game both seasons. So it's not like Mariota couldn't do it with somebody. He's already produced one guy along with Delaney Walker who could definitely – and I think Kyle Pitts is going to be a stud. But I get it.
I'm good with Pitts. Yeah.
Yeah,
I was bummed. I just missed Pitts in a draft. I was like, yeah.
So I've been trying to. I think with Pitts too. I have him as him and Andrews are neck and neck for me. I think Kelsey's a different level, and then it's them two, like in the middle to late third. I want them as much as I can, but I keep missing them. So and I think that if Delaney Walker be a 5'6" tight end with Mariota, I think Kyle Pitts is going to be a monster. So I get it there. All right, listen, that's all we got for today, folks. This was the Fantasy Football Projections 5 must-have players and 5 busts, joined by our expert and our guy behind the scenes, Rudy Gamble. Before you guys go, make sure you're following us across the board at Razzball Fantasy on YouTube, IG, and TikTok. And of course, make sure you go to razzball.com. We have a bunch of great tools. We have Rudy's projections for every player. Go check out the depth charts. Go check out the ADP tool and the articles. Trust me, it'll help you win your fantasy league. Once again, I'm your host, Bobby LaMarco. You can follow me at Bobby LaMarco on Twitter. Make sure you go follow that man, Rudy Gamble, at Rudy Gamble as well. Thank you for joining. We are out of here.